Alright, video number 3. In this video we're going to have a look at modifying your shapes and also creating more complex shapes out of simpler ones. Hopefully you did alright making the drop. Don't be too discouraged if you didn't. If this is your first time working with vector graphics, it is a tricky one to figure out straight away. So just as a little tutorial for creating that drop shape that we looked at in the last video. Most people get the first step, which involves getting your ellipse tool, keyboard shortcut L, and then drawing a circle on screen. So I'm holding down Shift as I draw that one. So most people get to this stage. Most people also get to the second stage. They know that they have to extend the top of that circle somehow. So we need to grab that point at the top there and drag it upwards. So if your shape is not selected, you can just sort of hover your mouse around there until you find the anchor, and then click and drag with the white arrow or the direct selection tool. Keyboard shortcut is A, and then you'll be able to drag that point up. So yeah, press A on the keyboard or grab your direct selection tool, grab that anchor, and drag it up. Now remember, if you don't find the point first time, you don't quite click on it, you can just click once on the shape, click once on the point, and then drag to move it up. And you should find a smart guide pop up on screen as well, which allows you to sort of keep that in the center of the object. So most people get to this stage, the egg stage. It's the last step of this process that often trips people up. How do you get that point or that corner up the top? Now, we kind of alluded to this in the previous videos when we were talking about those handles. Remember, handles are instructions that tell a path how to curve. And when you're looking at an ellipse, for example, you see two handles on that point, which means the lines going, or the paths going into and coming out of that point are both going to curve. If you consider something like a rectangle, though, those points do not have handles. So whenever you want a corner, you don't need any handles there. And that's kind of what we need at the top of this droplet here, that little point that appears at the top. We don't want any handles there telling that line how to curve. So we need to either shorten or remove those handles entirely. This gives you a good introduction to what a handle actually does. If you modify a handle, you can see the longer the handle is, the more curve you get. So if I have a really short handle, you get a very shallow curve. A really long handle, you get a deeper curve. And also the angle of the handle, or where you drag it, dictates in which direction that line is going to curve out. I actually like thinking of handles as kind of tugging on the path. You can see it's kind of like you're pulling that path towards you. Anyway, to create that droplet shape to finish off, you need to get your white arrow and select that point that you just moved up. And because you want a corner, you don't want handles on that point, or at least you want very small handles. So we can grab the handle and drag it towards the anchor. And in fact, in Illustrator, when you drag a handle onto a point, it removes it for you. So if I get both of those handles and drag them in, you can see there it removes them. It's a little bit taller than the other one I've got. I'll just grab that point and drag it down. And that's pretty much it. One thing I often do with a drop like this is I might grab these little handles just on the side here, because I find that this line can sometimes be a bit too shallow around there. So if I just extend that handle a bit, you get sort of like a rounder curve on that line, which gives you a nicer looking droplet. Although I guess that's a pretty subjective statement. So yeah, if you were doing this really quickly, you just go whoop, ellipse, get our white arrow, grab that point, drag it up, and then we get those handles and drag them in like so. You can see you can create that shape fairly easily. As we'll see later on today, there is a shortcut which allows you to move handles as well. Sorry, remove handles. Anyway. Just using the black arrow now to move that around on screen. And I might just create a couple more shapes on here. The other main thing you want to know about the shapes, so we've learned how to create them, we've learned how to manipulate them, we've learned how to modify the construction of those shapes. One thing you want to learn how to do is change the appearance of those shapes as well. Every shape that we've been making so far, because we haven't changed that, has had what they call a default appearance. And the default appearance on these shapes is to be filled with white and have a thin black stroke or outline around those shapes. But of course, you can make these shapes any color or any appearance that you want. And this is where some of your panels will come into play. So I'm just going to click on this ellipse to select it. And if we have a look at, for example, our swatches panel here, towards the right side of the screen, if you don't see your swatches there, just go to Window and Swatches, and you'll be able to bring that up. And you'll see this kind of like a little diagram in the top left corner of that panel, which you'll see every so often in other panels as well, which is basically controlling the attributes of that object, or sorry, more accurately, the appearance of that object, sorry. So you can see you have this solid square here, which is the fill, the color the object is filled with, and you have this outline square down here, which is the stroke, or the outline of the object. And you can click on either one of those to change that attribute of the object. So if I click on this object to select it, click on the fill, I can then choose a swatch, and that will fill the object with that color. Or you have a color panel up here where you can pick a color as well. There are more complex fills you can do. I mean, you can immediately see underneath you have a gradient panel, which allows you to do gradient fills, but for now we'll just worry about single color fills for now, or solid fills as they call them. Let's make that cyan there. If you want to change the color of the outline or the stroke, you can click on the stroke box there, and then you can choose the color you want. Because the outline is fairly thin, you're probably only just noticing the changes I'm making on screen. It's fairly subtle. But it may not have escaped your attention that you have a stroke panel as well. And in the stroke panel, you can increase the weight of that stroke, so you can have a thicker stroke around that object if you need it. Yeah, these attributes are available in a number of different places. So I tend to gravitate towards the swatches panel because that's just what I'm used to. If you have a look at your context bar at the top of the screen, you'll also see you have a fill and a stroke up here. So you can also change it from the top of the screen. And you can see right next to that you have a stroke weight as well, so you can control it from up there. Also, you have an appearance panel. Again, if you don't see that, go to Window and Appearance, and that will bring it up. And then you can see, I mean, the appearance panel here is pretty much your master control for how an object looks. There's a lot of things you can do from here, like multiple fills, multiple strokes, stroke characteristics, transparency, and all those sorts of things. So generally speaking, the appearance panel is what you would use to control all aspects of an object. But most of the time, you are just changing the stroke and the fill. So you could use these other options around the place. But anyway, from the appearance panel, we could change the fill color, and we could change the stroke color, whilst also changing the stroke weight. Now, of course, you don't have to have a stroke or a fill. So for example, on this circle here, if I didn't want that thick outline or that thick stroke around the object, a simple way is just to get the stroke color and set it to none. So that's usually the first swatch in the swatches panel, and it will appear in the various locations where you would change that. So an object can have no stroke around it, which you'll probably find is going to be a case with a lot of the letter forms that you're going to be drawing later on. It's also possible to have no fill. Same thing. You can click on the fill swatch, and then you can use the none swatch to remove that fill. Or you can do it up in your context bar, or you can do it through your appearance panel. Just be wary of that one. If an object has no fill, then you can no longer click in the center of that object to select it. So you see, as I click in there, I can't click on that object because there is no fill there to select. I'd have to click on the stroke for that object to be able to manipulate or move that around. When we started working today, and we created rectangles and things like that, you were able to click in the center and move those things around, because if you look carefully, you can see your object has a white fill. So there's a white fill in there that you're clicking on and moving it around. But if you make that white fill none, it's going to look the same on screen because of your white background, but now there's no fill in there. So there's nothing to click on and select. You then have to grab the outline to move it around. So if you find yourself in that situation where you can't seem to move the object for whatever reason, you might consider the fact that there's no fill in there. You might have to grab the outline instead. You can change the appearance of multiple objects at once as well. So with the black arrow or the selection tool, you can click and drag to select multiple objects. So if you click on an empty area in the screen and drag, when you're selecting things in Illustrator, your selection simply has to touch the objects to select them. So you don't necessarily need to draw a box around the whole object to select it. You can just touch it with your selection, and that selects the object there. So I could select all of those, and we could make the fill and the stroke for all of those identical. Or as I'm going to do, we could select all those objects at once, and we could just press delete to get rid of them if we wanted to. So we're getting there. We've got basic shapes, we've got the manipulation of shapes. Now we're looking at how we can change the color or the appearance of those objects. I said we're going to look at construction in this video. I think we'll do it in the next one because we're starting to run out of time with this one. I have a 15-minute limit on the program that records these videos here. Before we finish this one off, one thing I'll mention is in Illustrator you do have, for all intents and purposes, pretty much unlimited undos. And the shortcut is just Command Z or Control Z if you're working on a PC. And you can just keep pressing Command Z to keep going back. So if I just hold that down, I can go through all of these steps that I've been going through in this video so far. You can press Command Shift Z to go forward as well. The trade-off here is, unlike Photoshop, you don't get a history panel. So you just have to press Command Z or Command Shift Z to go back and forward through all your previous steps. Cool. So in the next video, we'll look at how you can construct more complex shapes out of simpler ones. This is where it starts to get fun.